if you don't know about the person, how are you able to determine that there's not any value in what they wrote? Hello, all. Apparently, I'm part of the mob now. So I'm trying to see if this is where. There is no mob, my friend. There is no mob, but I'm glad to have you. Grace and peace, my friend. Grace and peace. Matter of fact, I'm glad you're here because I'm going to talk about John MacArthur. So, since we all apparently we all esteem Mr. MacArthur too much. So I'm going to disagree with Johnny Mac. So John MacArthur is talking about why we should not debate on social media. All right. And let's give him a shot.
Let me give a little advice to those of you who, with good intentions, decide you're going to debate doctrinal issues in social media environments. Don't waste your time. I know enough about social media, not that I'm involved in it, I'm not, but I know enough about it to know that when I write a blog article and somebody picks up on something they don't like, somebody else picks on something that they don't like about what that guy didn't like, and all of a sudden this thing is completely out of control, and streams and streams of comments that have nothing to do with the original document or nothing beneficial to do with anything dominate. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you give people sort of half answers, brief answers, and they begin to take them apart. Social media is a minimum communication mechanism. Debates about sound doctrine belong on a much more in-depth and intense level. If you're going to talk about doctrine, you need to go deeper into the Word of God. It's not something you can just hassle over with sound bites or with cryptic statements and think you're actually going to make some progress. And it's pretty much the attitude of people of this culture anyway. If you're convinced against your will, you're unconvinced still, right?
All right, J Mac. All right. I totally understand. Now, first of all, we need to determine, what do we mean by social media? What do we mean by social media? Because a lot of people don't consider it, but the second largest search engine in the history of the world, you're on it right now, is YouTube. So YouTube is a social media platform. We don't see it like Facebook or Twitter or Gab, but YouTube is a social media platform. So I think we need to make sure we clarify. It sounds a lot like he's saying, like, we don't want to get into Twitter fights, which, you know what, I can totally agree with that. You're not going to make doctrinal treatise in 140 characters. I totally get it. In that regard, if it's only about messing around on Twitter, I don't think you need to debate that. I don't think there's going to be a debate. You're not going to change somebody's doctrine on Twitter. However, since we're talking about social media as a whole, I do think that YouTube is the right place to have those type of discussions and debates. Now, let me tell you why. Behind me are tons of books. And at one time, before there was a social media, many theologians wrote books in order to lay out their cases. So many people are familiar with Calvin. Okay. He wrote out his theory, or rather this theory, he wrote out what he understood of the doctrines of grace and what we now call Reformed theology or Calvinism in a response to someone else who wrote a book. So at that point, that's what they had. And therefore they would write these long books back and forth to one another, like literally write a book and you get a book to read. Like, come on, that's wild. So I think in the time and space that we're in today, we're able to do much more and share much more in a place like YouTube than we could if we were writing books to one another or nailing theses on doors of the church, so on and so forth. I think we can do better than that. And that's just where we are today. So I disagree with John in regards to all social media. Because again, Twitter is useless. I got you. Totally got you. Reddit, come on. It's like your drunk uncle at the picnic. Come on, man. He's just sitting there talking, rambling. Okay, I got you. But YouTube and video essays and such like that, I think a lot of that can be worked out. Now, granted, there's still going to be some back and forth. There's still going to be some disagreements. There's still going to be some missteps, so on and so forth. But we can flesh through certain topics here on this medium. I don't think we should say, oh, the only way to debate a topic is to have a face-to-face with a moderator in the middle doing the 2 minutes, 30 seconds, 90. No, we can literally do it just like this. And I think that, so again, I think there's some places that we should really define what he meant by social media. So again, Twitter, not so much. Reddit, not so much. Here on YouTube, Rumble, that kind of situation like that, yeah, I think so. Because please keep in mind, blogs are just a step below writing a book and a step above videos. So blogs are not that much different. I mean, you still got the comment section that can go crazy. You still got, I mean, again, it's very similar. So I don't think we need to do away with all of them. And especially, this is the medium by which humans now are communicating. So I don't think we should say, oh, the only way to do this is that way. So I do disagree with Dr. MacArthur in that respect. Not, for anything more than that, but just, I think we could still utilize all of this. And I mean, we see people who've utilized it fantastically. And again, you're never going to hit every dot or every step along the way. So even if we debated it, you would still miss it. If you did it on video, you're still going to miss it. If you did it on Twitter, you're going to sure enough miss it. So it's just my little 2 cents, my disagreement with Dr. MacArthur. All right. Yes, Twitter TikTok, totally useless. So again, if that's what he's talking about, I agree. Twitter, TikTok, not so much. YouTube, Rumble, I think there's one called Odyssey. No, I think we could still have that conversation still. I still think so. All right, hold on. I saw some other comments. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I don't, and hear me, I'm not disagreeing with John MacArthur. It was really more bombastic. I don't disagree with Dr. MacArthur at all. At the end of the day, we do want to be mindful of how we present the gospel and present doctrinal truths, absolutely. But I think somebody who's settled, one of the things I've noticed, quite a few people, they've actually not spent the time working through their own theology. Let me use a perfect example. Young Don. A lot of you all are familiar with Young Don Reborn, okay, on his YouTube channel. He was a popular gamer, has a really big following. He made a profession of faith, and he just went completely left. And I mean, every day he's saying something else contradictory. I think the most recent is that he doesn't believe in the Trinity. Okay, so he's doctrinally in error. But one of the things I notice when people like that, a lot of the time, they've never actually sat down with somebody to disciple them, to encourage them, and help them walk through and understand what they actually believe. They just say, oh, I prayed a prayer, I'm a Christian. Now I can open up a church. It's really that quick. And very rarely do they actually sit down and actually get taught. And I'll give you a contrast, because y'all know that Gothics is also a very famous YouTuber, very popular YouTuber. She has a great following and so on and so forth. She made a profession of faith, absolutely. And guess what? She's actually in a church. She's actually a member of a church. And I think if you listen to Gothics, if you listen to Young Don Reborn, you'll see like there's a contrast between Gothics has thought through quite a bit of her theology. Is she perfect? Come on now. Come on. But she's thought through a lot of her theology. If I heard Gothics tomorrow say there was no such thing as a Trinity, I would be surprised. I would be totally surprised, because she's already fleshed a lot of that out, in whether it be in her new members class, her new believers class, with her husband, so on and so forth. She's fleshed out a lot of that. And so now when she's on social media, she is laying out a very clear and cogent case for what she believes and why others should believe it. You follow Young Don, he's not a member of a church. He has not thought through a lot of the even the simplest aspects of the Christian faith. And he's just all over the place. He's just saying something different. He's literally contradicted himself on his own show. And in the same episode, he said one thing 1 hour, the next hour he said something different, totally contradicting it. So my point is, social media allows you another opportunity to flesh that out. What you believe. What do you believe about the threeness of God? What do you believe about election? What do you believe about the presence of evil? What do you believe about that? What do you already believe about that? And then this is what I think. So I think social media has a place. So that's just my 2 cents there. I'm glad, Brenda, yes, I love John MacArthur. He's a godly man and preacher. I don't agree with everything he says, though. No. And I don't think that you should. Matter of fact, my pastor and I don't agree on everything. Okay. My pastor and I have disagreed on certain topics and so on and so forth. I submit because he's my pastor, but I mean, it's never been like a fisticuff type of disagreement, but that could happen. That's perfectly fine. I don't think God ever expected us to agree with anybody 100% except him. I don't think he's expected us to agree with anybody, any other human 100% of the time. I just don't believe that. Yeah, I get what he's saying, Lady Hill. Absolutely. I get it. Reformed theology is hard to condense into a spicy meme. Well, there you go. Now, if you're using memeology, yeah, you're gonna run into some difficulties. I do like some good memes though, every now and then. But no, I totally get your point. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm not saying even argue. I'm saying not even argue. Especially if they don't know them on Facebook or Twitter or anything else. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you per se because I don't expect to sway you. However, a personal example, today I had somebody come to my comment section on my R.L. Dabney. Let me pull this up. Let me see if I can grab it real quick because I thought it was good and I think that this might show what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to argue with you about a point that I disagree with you on, but rather I want you to see where I come from and how I get that, where I got that point from. Where I don't expect you to, and yeah, definitely not trying to get you to argue with somebody or get into a fisticuff with someone. However, is it possible that you could show a level of graciousness and help them see where you come from and where your viewpoint arrives? Because that's ultimately what you want them to do anyway. I want you to think and come up with why. So if you, and I'm not going to read these to you because I think it's entirely too long. However, if you look, does it show up? Okay, cool. So if you go, I'll drop you out of here. There we go. All right. If you go to my YouTube, the Phil Johnson interview where Phil Johnson is talking about R.L. Dabney. All right. Kind of controversial character for sure. He was a theologian that had a, at the end of his life, he had a very racist, racially skewed viewpoint on the world. Got you. All right. So the person, and it's right here at the top, the person's, basically saying that, we're wrong for saying that you could still read R.L. Dabney. And so my question to the person was, have you read anything from R.L. Dabney? Because I have quite a few books on my shelf right here from Mr. Dabney. Now, by no means am I saying that everything he wrote was perfect and without needing some critique. However, I just asked the woman, have you read anything that he's written? She, of course said no. She chose not to. I said, not a problem. And I explained to her, hey, he really wrote in 3 segments. He wrote pre-war, he wrote during the war, and of course, after the Civil War. And I said, now, of course, his after the Civil War work is not the best. It's not his shining work. However, the earlier years, that stuff is actually really helpful. It's extremely helpful. If you would look at it, and I was going to give her a couple book suggestions, she said she really wasn't interested. So I'm not going to try to sway her. She's got to believe like I believe, or I got to believe like she believes. But I did want her to see, this is how I came to the conclusion that, and this is how Phil Johnson as well came to the conclusion that, we can eat the meat, spit out the bone. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. All those little colloquialisms. But there is something good that you can derive from it, and I explain why. But even more than that, even more at the end of the day, if you don't know about the person, how are you able to determine that there's not any value in what they wrote? How do you know that? So that was what I was really ultimately trying to push toward. It's like, hey, I understand you don't like R.L. Dabney. Okay, why don't you like him? How do you know that what he's written was racist? How do you know? Like, what have you read on your own? Because I've read it on my own. I didn't let someone tell me, but I actually read it myself. And I'm like, yeah, it's not these shining moments at all. Absolutely not. However, some of his early works is actually really good. And the bad thing is that if I read you some of his earlier works, you wouldn't know that it was R.L. Dabney. You wouldn't. You would say, yeah, like his stuff about public education, his stuff about the family, his stuff about culture. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. I promise you. I would read it to you right now. You would not know that it was anything different than your regular conservative Bible believing Christian today. And that's it. So back to the argument about whether or not we argue on social media. I think this is where we flesh out a lot of those things. I think it's good to flesh these out and debate them and have a little discussion, a little heated discussion even about it. And then at the end of the day, recognize I'm not going to change your mind. I just want you to start thinking about it, and I want you to consider it. That's all. Yeah, see, Vic, that's what I'm saying. That's why I say I think we really have to analyze what is social media. Because again, John MacArthur might have been saying social media, meaning Twitter. I'm thinking all of social media. That's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's Instagram, that's all of these platforms that the kids are using today, even TikTok, all of that. So then we got to figure out, put them all on the table, which ones are useful, which ones are not. So that's it. And Vic just said, I think explaining your position in a long form video on YouTube is different and totally acceptable. And that's it. Oh, thank you so much for hitting the like button. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Yes, TikTok is the social media disease for sure. Okay, as long as the responsive videos are done from faith and don't turn into cafeteria food fight, the servant of the Lord must not be quarrelsome. Absolutely. I mean, I think we can totally work that out, but at the end of the day, I don't think that all social media should be excused, because also I think my question to Dr. MacArthur would be, okay, what is another way? If you remove all social media, and whatever his definition of social media was, if we remove all social media, how do we have dialogue and discussion and vet through? Like Vic is right here in Atlanta. I know that, but let's just say we have a disagreement about something and we need to figure it out, or there's some doctrinal question that we have. How do we work it out if we don't use social media? Because again, I mean, some people might say Messenger is social media. I mean, again, there's a lot of different things that I think we should really clarify. As a good friend of mine says, we got to clarify terms. So I don't disagree with John MacArthur. I just think that we really need to lay out what are the terms, what is social media to you, because it might be different to me. I think a debate is okay, my friend Atlanta 82 says. Once the name calling ensues, it's no longer a debate. And many, many, many mature discussions don't turn into name calling. Many of them do. There are some, but those are the childish ones that most of us probably wouldn't even engage in the first place, because the person's already shown a propensity to not be able to be sound and rational. However, again, like using Vic as an example, Vic and I can disagree about, Buffalo Wild Wings over Taco Mac, and we don't have to get into name calling and whatnot like that. We can just say that Vic is wrong and I'm right. It's easy like that. That's just how we do it. And most people are mature and able to do that and keep it sane. And at the end of the day, the audience will still be able to ascertain, like, okay, these two men, these people engage with one another. They got into a verbal sparring match, but they shook hands. They were able to go get coffee afterwards without, starting a fist fight. That's what people want to see, because then they know, like, okay, your faith is genuine. Like, oh, you're really trying to live this out, because you're being civil with somebody that you disagree with, and you're not taking you're not taking a disagreement to not being personal and making attacks and so on and so forth, but rather just saying, hey, you know what? We disagree about this, and let's go.